Well, first tonight, where on earth is Ruth Allen? Ruth's funeral was held last week, but her grieving relatives and friends couldn't pay their final respects because they were not told by the man who controlled the last years of her life where her remains would go. Frank Pangallo has more on an acrimonious mystery.
Tell me what happened to Ruth. Where is Ruth?
I think it's unacceptable. I think it's totally disgraceful behaviour.
77-year-old Josie Theobald is distraught and bewildered by a morbid turn of events in the wake of the death of her older sister, Ruth Allen, 3 weeks ago.
Well, I wanted to know where Ruth was and what was happening to her, whether she was being by any chance cremated or whether maybe she'd been buried somewhere else.
I mean, these are answers that you're entitled to, aren't they?
Yes.
Josie?
Yes.
Yeah? And you couldn't get them?
No.
Since Ruth died, Josie, her son Michael and other family members and friends have been left in the dark by this man, Tony Butts, who held power of attorney over Ruth and is now the executor of her estate.
My mother had received no phone call, no condolences, no anything from Mr Butts.
Did you want to go and pay your last respects?
I did. I asked could I have a viewing and they said, well, come early, we'll just see. And when I got there early, they said no, the only one that had seen her for legal reasons was Tony, and that I was excluded.
How did you feel when you were told that?
Terrible. Terrible.
And the funeral itself was the strangest thing I've ever been to. Certainly the most bizarre funeral I've ever been to, because he walked in the door 1 minute before the service. There's a very brief eulogy, a very brief service. 30 seconds after the funeral is concluded, bang, he's straight out the door, not to be seen.
Well, what happened next defies belief. Mr Butts and the funeral directors didn't tell mourners where Ruth was to be buried so they could pay their last respects. They assumed it would be in accordance with Ruth's wishes to be interred in the family's plot of Payneham Cemetery along her parents, grandparents and a sister who died at a young age.
I thought I'd get closure there, but I couldn't get that either. I expected to find that it had been dug up and flowers on the top. There was nothing.
Ruth's body is somewhere. Has it been cremated? Has it been buried? Well, we just don't know. My mother and the rest of the family and Ruth's close friends have nowhere to go to leave flowers, to say goodbye, anything like that.
Did you try seeking some answers firstly from Mr Butts about what was going on?
No. He's not been very nice for a while. So I knew that he was, as executor, he was in charge of all the arrangements, so I left it to him.
Mr Butts came into Ruth Allen's life as a boy when his father had a short-lived relationship with her. With all her blood relatives, including Josie and nephew Michael, living interstate, she maintained her connection with Tony Butts.
Did he have that close relationship with her?
Undeniably, over the years, he was present in Ruth's life, so I can't say that he was some stranger who suddenly came out of the woodwork.
Josie moved from Sydney 4 years ago to care for her ailing sister and her dog. When Ruth was placed in a nursing home 2 years ago, Mr Butts butted in, first trying to evict Josie, then forcing her to pay rent to Ruth's estate, which he controlled.
Oh, when Tony tried to get me out of the place, oh, she said, Tony wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. I said, well, he did, Ruth.
We were concerned about the fact that he had power of attorney, but at the time he had assured my mother that everything would be transparent and she would be kept fully in the picture as to his finances and what decisions he was making, and that my mother would be consulted about those decisions in Ruth's best interests.
Do you know who the beneficiaries of this estate are?
Well, originally, year in, year out, when I came, Ruth used to say, I'm going to leave a third to David, a third to you and a third to Tony. And I thought, oh, well, that's fair enough.
Now, David is your deceased brother, isn't he?
He died, yes.
The will is yet to pass probate.
She owns a house, she owns shares, she had some term deposits and she had some cash in the bank. And plus, she also has some antique furniture, she has some paintings.
Funeral directors Chaz Berry told us they regretted being the meat in the sandwich of an acrimonious dispute. However, by law, they must follow the instructions of the executor of Ruth's estate, while privacy laws prevented them from revealing the location of Ruth's remains.
There's no obligation to notify anybody. Obviously, the executor needs to know the person's passed away, but they don't then need to pass that information on to anybody else other than those that they need to deal with.
Tyndall Gask Bentley lawyer Rosemary Caruso is a specialist in wills and deceased estates.
If you can't get that information directly from the executor, where can you get it from?
It's probably not the easiest thing to find out. It's possible to perhaps get a copy of the death certificate, which quite commonly will disclose who the funeral director is, as well as where that person is either buried or cremated, or where the cremation took place.
It's not right, it's not fair to the family.
Family First MP Dennis Hood says the situation confronting Josie is ludicrous.
This is not what privacy laws were intended to do in the first place. I think it's a misuse of the law, and I'll be looking to see what we can do about changing the law.
The will binds the executor to distribute the estate to the named beneficiaries, and they have a duty to those beneficiaries to do so. But with respect to funeral wishes, they are solely wishes. They are not binding on the executor.
Mr Butts was not at home when we called around, but in a phone call he told us nobody from the family had called him about Ruth. He refused to tell us where her remains are, but claims there was no room in the family plot at Payneham, so he chose a cemetery where another family member was buried.
Ruth specifically wanted to be interned at Payneham Cemetery, didn't she?
She did. Yeah, she especially told me that.
However, Josie and Michael say there isn't another location in the state, while the Payneham Cemetery Trust tell us Ruth can be buried with her relatives.
You should be really careful who you let get close to your family. Otherwise, it could happen to you.
I think this will haunt me for the rest of my life if it isn't resolved and I don't find out where she is.
Yeah, just terrible, isn't it? Frank Pangallo with that report.